Everyone, and welcome to the Unloc podcast. So my name is Marcus Hjelleset, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Unloc, and I'll be your monthly host. So each month for 30 minutes, we'll be connecting and speaking with the leading thought leaders, shapers, and movers within the real estate industry to get their take on how technology and digital access is reshaping their sector. For today's podcast, we'll be joined by the former COO of Notting Hill Genesis, who just taught me his secret on how housing associations can avoid downgraded governance and viability ratings, something he'll share with you too in this podcast. So before starting off, just to give you some context as to what we do here at Unloc, we deliver a mobile access solution. And in short, we help ensure that the right person at the right time has access to the right door. Now we do this by allowing access to be administered remotely through a web portal, and mobile keys to be sent in seconds to those who need access. And once received, the person in front of the door can open it from their phone and share keys with others as simply as sending a text message, saving costs, time, and, well, simply removing plain frustration from managing keys and fobs in the process. With that said, sit back and enjoy the show. So hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Unloc podcast. So on today's show, we'll be on the topic of what the new 2023 UK regulation requiring more frequent property inspections means for UK housing associations. And with that, we're lucky to be joined today by Andy Belton, previously the Chief Operating Officer and Deputy CEO of one of the largest housing associations in London, Notting Hill Genesis. So really eager to get Andy's thoughts on this topic in general. So welcome to the show, Andy.
Hi, Marcus. Thanks for inviting me, and it's great to be here.
Good. Thanks for joining. And I guess as a bit of an introduction, I mean, we know each other a little bit from before, but for those who doesn't, could you please tell us a little bit about your time in NHG and Notting Hill Genesis and how you ended up spending what I know to be so much of your time on your career on digital transformation?
Yeah. So if I go back before I worked in housing, I had a 20-year career in IT, sort of traditional route. So did some programming and project management, and then ended up managing shared services in Europe for a company called Unisys. And then I left Unisys and joined Notting Hill Housing in 2002, initially to just run one of their small businesses, which wasn't doing very well at the time. And then after 2 or 3 years, I joined the exec team and became the COO. And I was the COO at Notting Hill Housing for about 10 years, so running the day-to-day operations. And then in 2018, Notting Hill merged with Genesis, and I took a role on the exec board of the new merged organisation, NHG as we call it. And it was, although I kept the title of COO, it was more of a CIO role. So I had responsibility for IT, merger integration, and digital transformation. And we had set about building a platform that we called Workwise, and the idea was to digitize all of the housing management services. So all of the transactions between landlords and tenants, which include repairs and managing rent accounts and dealing with complaints and all of the hundreds of requests that flow between landlords and tenants. And that was a success. It became the sort of foundation for merger integration. And by the time I left in March this year, all housing management transactions were going through Workwise, either initiated by staff, but also it had become a self-service portal for residents, and about 65% of NHG's residents are signed up to use Workwise, and quite a lot of the repairs and a lot of the payments are initiated by residents now. So that was the sort of journey at NHG, and along the way, in doing all that work, then I met lots of different tech companies, including Unloc, Marcus, and we looked at ways in which technology solutions that have been developed for other sectors could possibly help in the housing sector.
Good. No, thank you. And glad we met. That why we're also here today. But you're enjoying also a different lifestyle now, and you're no longer with Notting Hill Genesis, right? Still, you're able to stay up to date on the latest digital transformations in the industry.
Yeah, I'm what they call semi-retired now, so I'm working as an advisor, we should say, with Unloc and another company in London called Plentific, both of which are working with the housing sector in the UK. And I do try and sort of keep an eye on what's going on. And I'm a big advocate of, as I said earlier, the housing sector is behind when you compare it to sectors like retail and banking, and lots of the things that have been done in those sectors. If you look at the way logistics works, we all order stuff on our phone and have parcels delivered, and we know exactly what's going on. Well, it's not that dissimilar to a lot of the components of getting a repair done in someone's home. So I think, we don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. A lot of it's been done in other sectors, and we can just adapt it for the housing sector, I think. Yeah,
not true. Good reflections. All right, so onto the topic of today's call then. The growing pressure on the UK Housing Association to really prove that their properties are safe and secure for tenants to live in. And my take on this is not only as a result of the Grenfell fire, but I guess more from recent issues like the death of the 2-year-old from exposure to mold in one of the properties of I think it was Rochdale Borough-wide Housing. So in particular in today's session, I want to get your take, Andy, on specific regulation taking effect from January 2023, which requires social landlords to increase the rate of fire safety inspections on their properties, which in practice means that some properties will need to be inspected as much as up to every third month. So, just to set the scene there, why are we seeing this increased frequency of inspections in the first place, you think?
Well, I think it does. Ultimately, it goes back to the Grenfell disaster and the inquiry that followed. And there has been, we've seen over the last few years, there's just been gradual increases in regulation in different areas, partly, as I say, due to all of the things that came out of the Grenfell inquiry. If you look at the wider picture, though, for housing at the moment is really quite a challenging agenda. All the stuff that we're seeing in the news around inflation, cost of living crisis. We've got strikes going on, as I'm sure you're aware, in the UK this week. So there's lots of cost pressures, operational pressures that boards of housing associations are dealing with, and then there are a number of regulatory changes coming through as well. So increased consumer regulation. There's more scrutiny from the Ombudsman around complaints now, and then increased requirements coming out of the Building Safety Act this year. So certain components of buildings are going to have to be inspected more frequently. And then the thing that we're specifically talking about today, Marcus, is the new fire safety regulations that are coming out in January, which, as you said, for buildings over 11 meters mean that all of the fire doors within a building, so all of the flat doors, have to be inspected once a year, but the communal doors are going to have to be inspected every 3 months now. So this is a big change for lots of landlords who've got those buildings over 11 meters. And it's sort of putting it on it's putting it on a par with gas compliance, really. So, they're going to have new policies and procedures. It's going to require additional resources, and they're going to have to demonstrate that ongoing level of compliance and have that information at their fingertips to do that. So it's a big change, and in the environment that I've described, it's yet another thing that is going to stretch their resources and their capacity to do this. So it's quite serious, and it's quite a big change. Yeah.
Are you happy to be sitting outside the housing association sector at the moment?
Well, I mean, in some ways, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. Yeah, I think it is. The last 10 years, probably apart from COVID, the last 10 years of my career in housing were, very, very different to the environment that housing associations face now, for sure. Yeah. So, but I really do think that, one of the sort of strands of a strategy that's going to work is going to be technology. So I don't think you can't cope with this sort of ever increasingly difficult environment without deploying technology that helps you to do it, I think. So, and if you look at the this specific challenge around these new fire regulations, then as I say, it's going to consume a lot of additional resource. People need to try and get it right first time. And one of the issues is going to be, access issues, because, that's always the case with these compliance areas. There's a lot of history around managing gas compliance, where no access is an ongoing issue, and because it's ultimately the access is governed by the tenancy agreement. So you have to go to court to force access if people won't let you in. So this is going to be it's going to face similar challenges in terms of the annual inspection of individual flat doors. If the residents don't let you inspect their door, then you're going to have processes to get around that. Yeah.
Do you think with that? I mean, you mentioned that fire safety inspections are. The fire issue are essentially being put on par with the gas compliance element. Will access be done in an easier and more streamlined way due to the learnings that housing associations have had from conducting all these gas compliance checks as well, or are they starting from scratch at this point? Or what's your thoughts on this?
Well, no, I mean, I think they're well practiced at meeting the gas compliance targets, and typically what that means is that in order to be compliant in terms of re-inspecting every 12 months, the process of re-inspection normally kicks in way ahead of 12 months. So normally at 9 or 10 months of the existing certificate, the process will start to deploy contractors to start to message residents to say, we need to come and inspect your boiler, and then that will in most cases that will result in a successful re-inspection and recertification. But there's always a percentage, and it could be 10 or 20% where it just doesn't go smoothly, and then you have to have additional processes, additional communications, and in the end, you get to a point where very few landlords are 100% compliant on a continuous basis. They're normally something around 99.75 or something like that. There's always a few outliers that are going through that process of gaining access. And as I say, ultimately, if you can't persuade the resident to let you in, you have to go to court and get an injunction. So it can be quite a long, drawn out, costly process to do that. So anything you can do to smooth that out to make the access issues easier is going to help. And
Yes.
Sorry, go on. No, you go. Sorry.
I'm just thinking, is the being 99.8 or 99% compliant, is that enough? Is it fine? Do they need to actually be worried about the access issues at hand?
Yeah, well, as I say, it's a sort of risk management decision, and if you did want to be 100% compliant every day of the year, you would probably have to start the process, at 6 months into the existing certificate rather than 9 months or 10 months. So there's a balance between cost and risk management. They very rarely, when a case is non-compliant, then the processes ramp up fairly quickly. So it would be very rare that a non-compliant case goes on for any period of time, but it could be non-compliant for a matter of weeks, before you get a court injunction. Yeah. So I imagine this, the same decision process will have to take place around these fire risk inspections if you want to be, obviously the expectation is to be 100% compliant, but you have to, you have to work out what the processes are, and do you build those processes so rigorously to be 100% compliant, or do you manage some risk around the edges of it? And I would guess it will be treated somewhat like gas. If obviously Unloc is looking at primarily addressing the access issues for communal doors. So I think in that scenario where you have to do an annual inspection of a communal door, if you have Unloc deployed with a digital lock that that doesn't require anyone to let the inspector in, that's going to help.
In terms of these issues, then with no access to actually being able to get into these properties to conduct the inspections, if they do happen again and again and so on, what's the actual consequence, if anything, for a housing association? As in, why should they care about this?
Well, I guess probably the most important reason for doing it is to make sure that the residents are as safe as they can be. So firstly, if you can't carry out the inspection, there's a risk that the fire door is not fit for purpose. I guess the other side of it is the sort of governance risks. If the organization, if the landlord can't meet the compliance requirements, then they will run the risk of some intervention from the regulator, and that puts their governance ratings at risk. And in the extreme scenario, if they were failing really badly to be compliant, then the regulator could downgrade them, and if they're downgraded to the sort of the level of G3 or G4, then the regulator would pretty much they will parachute people onto the board, and take over the running of the organization. So it's very similar to the consequences that have been in place around gas compliance for many years. And as I say, I think that's so for two reasons, organizations will take this very seriously. Firstly, it is ensuring safety in their buildings, but secondly, they need to demonstrate that they've got the right governance arrangements in place to be compliant. And as we talked about at the beginning, it's one of many things that's putting pressure on housing associations. The other thing that we haven't mentioned is just about a week ago, there was the publication of something called the Better Social Housing Review, and that's a review that's been run by the National Housing Federation and the Chartered Institute of Housing jointly, and they've come out with a number of recommendations that they think housing associations should adopt. But one of them is that there should be a national audit of all housing stock, and they've framed the recommendation as that. So it's not that individual housing associations should do a sort of bespoke audit. They're saying it should be done in a consistent way, and it should be done on a national basis. All housing associations working together to do it, and the results should be made public. And that the time frame suggested for that is that it should begin in 2023 and should take no more than 3 years. So again, that's a huge piece of work for housing associations. Obviously, they should all be sort of inspecting their stock on a regular basis anyway, but this is now putting a much more formal framework around that. So I think all of these things together are putting more and more pressure on the day-to-day running of housing associations, but also they're all things that in the end could be problems for the board in terms of the governance rating.
Yeah, no, good point. And I think that as we said at the start of this, the pressure is just growing week by week. And when will it end for the housing associations, or if it will end at all? But what's slightly subjective, I'll admit to that. But having working for Unloc and working with digital access, why is there that when it comes to providing more streamlined and remote access to someone who needs to be let in from just a PC or a mobile, why hasn't digital access been adopted by housing associations, you think, so far, with the history and context that you've just described? I mean, they've dealt with these no access issues for a long time. They've had the gas compliance element prior to fire safety inspections increasing and so on. So why hasn't we seen a shift towards this yet?
Well, I think as I said at the beginning, Marcus, I think the housing sector is still behind in terms of adopting digital solutions in lots of different areas of the business. The focus, as was the case at NHG, has probably been around customer services and what you would call housing management transactions. So there are lots of other areas of the business that are still, running systems and business processes that are probably quite old in a lot of cases. And I think, the whole area of compliance is one of those areas, and people they just haven't got to the stage of seeing digital solutions that can be implemented easily. And I think, it is coming, but we're probably at the beginning of it.
Any tips for the viewers, or if you were in their shoes, on how to speed up this transformation shift towards digital access? How to go about this in practice?
Well, I think, like all big changes, I think you need someone at the top of the organization who has probably executive responsibility for this area of the business, to be the champion of this change. And then that gets the organization behind it. Nothing's ever free, so there has to be some commitment of resource. There has to be some initial investment. From what I've seen, there is a good business case for digital access in terms of preventing ongoing no access, reducing depending on the nature of the organization, there can be lots of savings in terms of miles covered, wasted trips, and then ultimately things being done right first time provides a better experience for the residents. So I think the business case stacks up, but I think you've got to get someone in the organization to understand that business case, who in turn has the right level of influence to then make it happen. So that would be, if I was if I was still inside NHG, I'd be advising you to get to me or one of the other executives, and get them to understand what a compelling case there is, really. Yeah.
No, good point. And from having worked in the Nordics for since 2017, and with Unloc and working on digital access here, and creating what is now an infrastructure for access into properties that the fire brigade has adopted, and the residents and tenants and staff, and to conduct all these different types of visits. It's interesting to see how the UK is lagging a little bit behind in this, and how it's, I guess, over here has been a little bit more business as usual, and something to deal with at a later point, where I think, and hopefully, and I still admit it's a little bit subjective, that it might be different this time too, where you have increased rate of inspections going up and up and up, and not seeing any immediate change in the near future with all of this, just providing more operational complexity to managing their properties. So
I think that's right. It's been as long as I worked in housing, the management of keys and access was sort of considered to be a cost of doing business, and nobody really thought there was a sophisticated solution out there. So I think if people begin to understand that Unloc can manage a wide range of digital locks in a lot of different sort of use case settings, so communal entrance doors, plant room doors, car park entrances, all of those things, and you start to take away all of the friction that exists today in those settings, then as I say, I think if you can get the right people to sort of spend the time understanding this, then I think the business case probably makes itself. Yeah.
Good. We could speak for hours about this topic, I think, but just to kind of try and wrap up, because we're nearing the end of the episode. To summarize, I mean, the pressure is on in the UK. It has been for quite a while, but still will be very much so going into 2023, with the new regulation requiring social landlords to perform more frequent safety checks on their properties. And as you mentioned, then this might bring with it increased compliance risk due to people not being able to access properties, carry out these inspections in time, which could result in a worst case scenario, downgrade of their governance rating or GOV rating, which could have a larger negative impact on the social landlord. Thank you for the comments, Andy. I mean, do you have any? I want to ask you two final questions. One is looking ahead 2023. Any predictions you think from your end, looking outside into the sector, that you think will be some major predictions or trend that we'll see happening in 2023 with the UK Housing Association sector?
I think I would hope that people are going to go much more quickly with decisions around implementing technology. So I've seen lots of cases now where I think housing associations can see the benefits of technology, but they're still very, very wary of moving quickly. So I think with all of these problems to solve over the coming year, I would hope that people are going to be a bit braver about implementing some technology that can help them to do it and provide long-term sort of modern solutions, rather than just constantly sort of trying to patch it up. So, would I say that's a prediction? It's more of a wish than a prediction, Marcus. But hopefully it's going to go a bit quicker. Yeah.
Good, and I'm sure all the prop tech startups out there are appreciating that prediction. But and fingers crossed. Anyways, final question, and I want to try and end each episode with this. What's one thing, Andy, that most people don't know about you? And, give us some goodies here. Don't be shy.
Well, I was born in Ireland, and I went to school there until I was 9 years old, and I was at school with Bob Geldof. He was 2 years older than me, so I can't claim to have known him. But I've got a school annual from then, and there's a picture of Bob Geldof in it. Already being a rebel because he was wearing a flowery tie with his school uniform. So,
well, that's good. Cool, good. Thank you, Andy, for attending the episode and joining me on this podcast and sharing your insight. And I wish you a great weekend.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Marcus. Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure as always, and have a great weekend too.
See you, Andy.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.